to do it much damage to Charles. So, I mean, he should do the work. Charles, you're coming, right? It's still happening, Brazil.
Yeah, I'm sending in my visa application today. So provided they grant my application, then I'll be going.
Me too. Fingers crossed for me too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are we?
Yeah.
I mean, I'll hang out for a few minutes, but is our part pretty much finished, or do I need to stay on?
In fact, after this half an hour, we would like to come back with everyone.
Okay.
Kind of engage with everyone. And it would be good if you would still have the time to be there with them. There's some noise coming from somewhere. I don't know. Okay. But may I just use the time, Charles, to go a little further in the conversation about taboo, synchronicity, listening and not knowing, and maybe this is again kind of just an attempt to know in a kind of more or less subtle way. I don't know, but there is something where, and that's why I found what you said about the taboo significant, because it just gave me a hint how there's an instance in myself where, although I do like to kind of figure it out, there's from somewhere coming a respect to not go there, to have this. And there is an intuitive something that needs to be respected, and that usually particular Western educated people don't respect in that sense. And where I feel that any kind of, not just new activism, but also when we talk about how do we develop, how do we go further with where we are as humanity, that this is a relationship to relating to life that we have to relearn here, because it is something that we are quite far away from. And this is also how I understand your work, and the little I do know it. There's something to be regained and something to be understood, that where we went with particular our Western history, or was a separation from that.
You know, in various
your work about that anyway.
In various wisdom traditions, you know, wisdom lineages, mystery schools, there are things that are not told to students because it wouldn't be useful to them to know it. In fact, it would be the opposite of useful. So, you know, it's not so much that the answer to the paradox is not useful to you, but the process of coming to that answer and the whole state of being that is involved in working out the answer may not be useful. And the answer, it's like a Zen koan, you know? The point isn't to solve the koan. It's to allow the koan to work you.
Mm-hmm.
And the koan, you know, isn't explained necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
So the taboo is for our own good, really. And just to say one more thing, like when Bayo is saying that he's not very fond of principles, I think part of what he probably means is that this, like the whole kind of Western formula for how to live in the world or how to apply knowledge says first you come to basic principles. In mathematics, they're called axioms. And then you reason forth from those principles and can therefore know what to do in any situation because you base it on principles. So it could be ethical principles. So you face a situation, should I, push the fat guy in front of the train so that the train doesn't hit the 5 children down the tracks, right? This is like one of these scenarios that ethicists fabricate in order to point out, difficulties in ethics. So do you push the guy in front of the tracks to save the 5 children there? Well, so let's reason from basic principles. 1 life is not worth as much as 5 lives, or direct killing somebody is not okay, and this and that. And the idea is if you come up with finely differentiated set of principles enough, you would be able to reason your way to an answer. That whole way of thinking is, I think, part of the problem of our civilization, or at least it's a very, very narrowly appropriate way to approach life that has been applied way too broadly. So, and it comes also down to this kind of hubris, to say that at the base of all of this complexity is something very simple that we can understand and therefore thereby become the masters of everything. I don't know if Bayo, you're probably thinking along these lines a bit, but maybe Bayo can add something to it.
No, I don't know that I have anything to add. You said it. If we, so I'm still stuck. There's a stickiness around the subject of the taboo. The place you're not supposed to go. Don't broach the subject. Don't come here. And I'm struggling to convey a set of feelings, but I find myself dealing with the burden of the obvious, and it seems difficult to translate that into words. So I'll just sit with it for a while, and let it do its work. But basically, everything Charles said about acting from a place of principles, figuring out the world in a few set of axiomatic statements and formulas is exactly the way that I do not know how to live. And what I am currently struggling with as a recovering academic that was conditioned to stay within the confines of an ivory tower and act from there, And if the world doesn't fit my methodology, if it doesn't fit my outcomes, then there's no world. It's because my positivistic notions are grounded. They're grounded. So if the world doesn't behave, if we can't put the world in a family way, and there's something wrong with the world. Yeah, so this fluidity that I met and was so shocking in meeting those healers, and what I've encountered ever since in meeting a world that is still figuring out itself, and I can't emphasize that enough. We strive for authenticity, and I think this notion of authenticity is kind of tethered to the reductionistic paradigm of Western technologies. We need to act from that space. But this notion of a world that is still in an ongoing state of teenage authenticity, it's still figuring out itself. It's still awkward. It has limbs everywhere. It's still, in a state of puberty, doesn't know itself. To know the world that way, to feel the world that way, is to be invited to a playful realm. It's to, and by play, I don't mean a denial. I'm not trying to elide seriousness or the specificities of a condition that invites us to approach in very particular ways. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that a world that is promiscuous, a world that is wild, and yeah.
Actually, it's interesting because this right now feels taboo. It feels like pushing to put language to what you were trying to express feels like something to take an enormous amount of care around.
Hey, I'll say this quickly, and I usually say this most of the time, and I shared this on a big post before, and it just came to me, and I feel, so this is not in direct response to what we're talking about, but I feel I could at least language this, and it's also a proverb. There's a saying that when you meet an obstacle, you, like a taboo, for instance, you risk not continuing in the same way that you started off. So the idea is for a taboo is not to, the taboo isn't saying don't come here. It's saying what you risk, what is at stake here is your shape, is your constitution, and death itself is a change of constitution. So if you come here,
it's going to change. Like who you were or the way the world was for you is very likely going to shift. Like you might lose your marriage, or it might reconfigure, or I mean, it's just, that would be an example of a taboo. And what Bayo was talking about, like you won't probably die if you do that, but in a way you will. Who you were, once you enter that territory, you will not emerge from it the same person.
It's interesting because I was thinking about some of the things that are taboo or can't be spoken about are also are sacred. Are not and that they have the same. They can be death producing in a similar way, but that they're beyond language. There's another recognition. I think that was something that you were. I wondered if you were sort of heading towards or thinking about that. There's a certain recognition that is that when subjected to analysis and picking apart and so forth, kills it. And makes, and yet there's something that one can't deny in it or in touching it, and it's like living. I often think that the taboos like that you spoke about, Charles, are often layers around culture and identity that are all, when you were speaking about your wife, I think identity is a form of trauma, because it's a cutting off of me from something else, defining me as opposed to, and we're taught that, we're given ways to do that, but that the those taboos kind of breaking the wall of your identity and who you're supposed to be, are often sort of really created for us. But the sacred is something that is a different kind of taboo. It's a different kind of don't go there. Don't go there with your mind. Don't go there with your, with your microscope. Don't go there with the attempt of trying to nail this and pick it and define it and get it under your control, because you can't. And those taboos I'd like to celebrate.
But I think it's good to also see that there are different forms of taboos. And that I didn't think about it, but you're right. I meant this sacred taboos, because there are, for example, taboos in German society do not talk about some parts of our history, really. And it's a taboo. But it's definitely
a social taboo.
It's a social taboo, but it has a different nature as a taboo. And the taboo that I heard it just didn't come from there. It came from a more sacred place than that.
It's not that different, though, really. Because if you really venture deep into the territory of that paradox, the answer you will get is shattering. And most people, if they apprehend that answer intellectually, they'll keep it in an intellectual box as a philosophical thing, but they won't actually, they'll contain it. They'll contain it, and they actually still won't venture into the territory of the taboo. Because what it really calls, if you let it in all the way, is, like I said, shattering. It's leads down a path of very, very radical trust, very, very radical faith. And will lead you to do things that your rational mind would say are absolutely crazy and dangerous. So I'm speaking in a vague way, because I don't want to venture into that territory too much. But I know this territory, and it's just not somewhere I want to go, usually.
The mountains of Mordor. Caves, dark alleys. I just wanted to express a sense of peace with hearing that phrase, beyond language. And I don't know who uttered, I think it is you, Elizabeth, when you said beyond language. And I felt something just wrap over me. Like, I don't know whether it was the Holy Spirit, but I felt a deep sense of, like a sigh, like that there are some things that I don't need to struggle to put words to, because language itself is a species that, emerges from the earth or emerges with the earth. It is not a barrier between us and reality as it really is. It's just one of the things that crops up. And so the idea that there's some things beyond words, beyond language, beyond thought, and that thinking itself, there are ecologies of thought, and thinking has its lifespan, and it has its life cycle, and it germinates and it dies as well. Just to feel that is and I think that also ties into the dance of a taboo, to know that there are spaces that there are spaces or territories that are beyond reckoning, and that's okay.
A lot of people, when they are seeking an answer to this question about, action and non-doing and all this kind of stuff, what they really want actually is permission. They want permission to do or not do the thing that they want to do or not do. They want permission to engage with something. They want permission to, disengage with something. And the metaphysical apparatus that they're seeking is, I think, usually just like a really complicated way of giving themselves permission. So it makes me want to ask, like, what do you really want? What's your real question? What's really at stake here?
It's permission, and also the desire to be safe, don't you think? I want to know that what I'm doing has consequence, right? It's not going to. I mean, why do we spend time on Facebook? It's to break through the known barrier of consequential experiences and to burst through that place of relevance where we can actually. It feels at least I sense that when that question is asked, people are also wanting to say, they're wanting to be safe, to know that if I act this way, is it correct? Is this the right way to act? Is this going to be of some consequence?
It's interesting. I did a lot of interviewing of lots of people in graduate school from the ages of 5 until 85. And I was always struck, particularly by the older people, by the fact that it was like water on a plant to be listened to. That the sense that they lived an entire life and felt parched because they'd never been heard. We asked them about questions about difficult choices that they made in their lives, things that they didn't know, weren't sure what the right thing to do was, and grappled with, and what was that about, but what I was always found very painful that someone would be 75, 80, 85 and say, and be saying, no one's ever asked me something like this, or no one never bothered to listen. And I when I think about what is the real the real question that people have, it's interesting because we play it safe, we all do, in one way or another, and yet the desire to be heard, not to be heard, but to be heard, as from one soul to another, saying wow, it's confusing out here, isn't it? Or it's hard to know what's the right thing to do, and whether or not being here has mattered, and to whom and for what. And I think we actually, more than I think we care to admit it, we live big questions, actually. We may hide from them, but even the hiding from it is a living from it. The big question that we don't ask directly, or some do, but it's always a question. It's never answerable in a certain way.
And I think it's also okay to be safe, but it's also okay to have the desire to be safe. There is a form of safety that kills, but there's also a form of safety that allows to dare. And it's not that the desire to be safe is killing unnecessarily. It can, but there's something there in allowing to be safe. Something can open also in that, and it's there is no general answer to this. How it's something that allows really to okay, this is going somewhere, or no, this is a safety that basically stops everything, and that just to see that there's also a place for safety in what we are doing this.
Maybe it depends on what we put our stake in the safety of. Where is the safety located? Is it in my being the smartest kid in the class, and that's the only time I can ever be safe? If I make sure everyone else isn't, or what?
Yeah.
I think.
Ben, how are we doing?
I'm doing fine. We have about 30 seconds, and then I'll make a 1-minute announcement.
Cool.
And then we'll close the rooms in 1 minute. Everybody will come back in the same room together.
Yeah. I think just to open up the space for everyone to bring what they talked about, and also just use this as a time to also engage with Charles.
Okay. Somehow I wasn't aware that this was a 2-hour event, so I'm kind of.
Oh, sorry.
Feeling antsy.
A little bit, because lunch and everything, but that's okay. We have another 20 minutes maybe.
Yeah, but actually, we maybe 10.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool. There might be family noises in the background though. So.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, we're going back. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Beam me up.
See you. See ya.